Hello guys, welcome to my channel. So today we're going to do the 3 chapters of Footprints Without Feet book. The first chapter is The Midnight Visitor. We will not go through the NCERT, we'll go through quick revision notes. Two boys on London street were surprised to see fresh muddy footprints of bare feet without finding who was making them. These footprints had been made by Griffin, an eccentric scientist who had discovered how to make his body transparent, which means invisible. To get away, he had burned his landlord's house. He had burned his landlord's house down. He had to remove his clothes so that he became invisible. Griffin entered unseen into his big store to get warm. When the store closed at night, he put on new clothes, consumed meat and coffee from the restaurant, and went to sleep on a pile of quilts. He overslept and was seen by the shop assistants. In the morning, he again took off his clothes to escape them. Then he entered a theatrical company, wore bandages on his face, dark glasses, a false nose, and bushy side whiskers. He robbed the shopkeeper of his money and escaped to Epping village by the train to avoid being caught. He rented 2 rooms at an inn in the village. He explained to Mrs. Hall, its owner, he had an accident and didn't want to be disturbed. Soon his money finished, so he robbed the clergyman's house using his invisibility. That day when Mrs. Hall entered his room, she and her husband were attacked by the furniture. This made Mrs. Hall think that it was haunted by spirits. When the clergyman reported the burglary to police, the Griffin was suspected of having a hand in it, so the village constable Jeffers came to arrest him on suspicion. Meanwhile, Mrs. Hall asked Griffin to explain all the unusual happenings. Griffin lost his temper and took off his clothes, thus becoming invisible, knocked Jeffers unconscious, and ran away. This was a summary of the whole story, The Invisible Man. So all the footprints without feet. So thank you for watching. We will continue the next story. Now we're going to start the making of a scientist. Richard's article. It is about a scientist named Richard E. Bright. Richard's article on how cells work, published in a science journal at the age of 22. Richard was a single child and didn't have any friends to play with, so he became interested in collecting butterflies and various other items. His mother helped him with all the equipment he needed. She guided him and helped him to learn. He read a book, The Travels to Monarch X, which created a love for science. He raised thousands of butterflies at home over a few years. He tagged them as they grew and fed them to study their migration. Richard put a slide of frogs at the countryside fair but did not win any award. His defeat inspired him to experiment. He took help from Dr. Urquhart to work on various projects. He won many awards at the country and international science fairs in subsequent years. His work on viceroy butterflies got him the first position award in a fair. Richard discovered a hormone necessary for the growth of the monarch butterfly. He worked at the Army Laboratory, the US Department of Agriculture Laboratory. Richard spent a year at Harvard as a freshman before going back to the laboratory to discover the chemical structure of the hormone responsible for the gold spots of the monarch pupa. His findings motivated him to study cells and how they read their DNA. His theory may help to prevent many kinds of cancer and other diseases. He graduated from Harvard with 2nd position among 1510 students. His other interests included debating, public speaking, photography. Richard's social studies teachers praised him for his excellent mind, curiosity, and a will to win, the essential qualities of a scientist. This is a conclusion of the chapter, Making of a Scientist. Now we will start the necklace. The summary of the story is, this story is about a woman who does not know how to live within her means. Mrs. Loiseau belongs to a middle-class family but wants to live a lavish lifestyle. Her husband is a clerk who cannot afford to fulfill all her demands. For attending a party, Mrs. Loisel decides to borrow a necklace from her friend who is rich. Mrs. Loisel loses the necklace while returning from the party. Mrs. Loisel and her husband spend all her fortunes and borrowings to buy a similar necklace which costs them a fortune. After that, they have to do everything which could be done so that they could repay the loan. It takes about 10 years of hard work and lots of sacrifices before she is able to pay all her loans. The time and all the hard work take their toll on her and she ages quickly. After that torturous period had passed, she happens to meet her rich friend and tells the whole story. Her friend tells her it was not a diamond necklace but a cheap imitation jewelry. So basically, Loisel had a moi moi moment, actually. So sad. The central idea of the story is that a sense of false pride, greed, and envy can lead to a person's destruction. The main character, Matilda Loisel, is the perfect example of the central idea stated. She has a fair life, a roof over her head, a loving husband, and food, but because of her false pride, she wants more than what she has. The theme of the story is that the necklace is a mild satire with a strong message. It is ridiculous for people of ordinary means to copy the rich. One should live within one's means. Otherwise, he or she invites unnecessary problems and anxieties, confusion in his or her life. The main message of the story is that we should be happy with what we have. False pride is the cause of our sufferings. The loss of false necklace by Mrs. Loisel was not a big loss. Things could have been settled right if she had confessed the loss of the necklace to the owner, Madame Forestier. This small lapse or mistake of Mrs. Loisel makes her whole life miserable and dark. And the irony was that the cause of all this suffering was a false necklace. The message in this story is that you should be grateful for what you have, and it is better to tell the truth and face the consequences than try to protect one's pride by telling a lie. Thank you for watching. Bye.